Hi, and welcome back to Breaking Bio. I'm Morgan Jackson, a PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada.
I'm Heidi Parker. I'm a postdoc at the University of Texas at Austin, but I'm currently located in New York City.
Big city gal. And this is episode 84. And for this episode, we're going to be talking about wildlife conservation, snakes, and, of course, natural history on Twitter with the best biologist on Twitter, according to Slate Magazine, Dr. David Steen, who also happens to be an assistant research professor at Auburn University. Hey, David, thanks for joining us this week.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
It's good to have you finally on the show. Can you let everybody at home give a bit of a background on what it is you do as your day job, and also a little bit of what you do on Twitter and such?
Sure. I am an assistant research professor at Auburn University, like you mentioned. I study wildlife ecology and conservation biology. I'm interested in how animals use the landscape and how that might bring them into conflict with how we use the landscape and try to generate solutions so we can all live together in a big, happy family. Most of what I study involves the most exciting group of animals out there, and I'm talking, of course, about the amphibians and reptiles, although I have dabbled in some other groups. One of the projects that takes up most of my time here at Auburn is that of the reintroduction of the Indigo Snake to Alabama. It's North America's largest native snake, federally threatened, went locally extinct in Alabama in the 1950s, and so what we're doing is we're reintroducing them, trying to bring them back.
That sounds really great, and we'll hear, maybe you can talk about that a little bit more at the end. I was really excited when I heard the Slate thing, because usually when popular press picks up a scientist on Twitter, it's not usually someone who's so legitimate. Like, you're the real deal, right? You do science that's also friendly to the public, right? You write things for the public, you do outreach with the public, but you're doing really great things, and you do really well on Twitter, and you're not just a snaker. Because I remember in the early days of Twitter, I was like, I was a snaker, but there's a lot more of other stuff going on here. Were you surprised at the Slate thing?
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was a little surprised because you never know who's watching and listening when you're tweeting out into the ether. And the guy that wrote the article, Nicholas Lund, he's at the Birdist on Twitter. He actually told me a few days in advance that he was planning this article. It's very exciting. And if you haven't read it, basically what I do on Twitter. Twitter is great for finding an audience, finding people that are interested in wildlife, because we all know those statistics that most people can't even name a living scientist, and many of the people that can say Stephen Hawking. So that means that we can't really count on the general public to know what questions to ask or really find somebody to ask them. But Twitter makes it easy to find people who are just kind of asking questions. And so I look for people that are doing that, particularly folks that are interested to know what kind of snake they just found. And I'm happy to tell them.
Well, I think this is as good a point as any to talk about, because you're doing a really cool campaign for the last few months, I think, where you've been identifying snakes for people and helping them discern whether they've got the slightly dangerous coppermouths or copperheads or cottonmouths, I suppose. I'm not a snake person. We all know I'm going to screw this up. Versus all sorts of the other stuff. And you've been doing a lot of work on being really positive, even when you're seeing tweets and stuff and photos of snakes that have been harmed or killed for out of fear and real no biological reason. What was kind of the idea behind this super positive and really strong outreach campaign that you took on lately?
Well, I think that conservation needs to start in your backyard, and it's going to be hard to convince people to care about some of these creepy, crawly creatures like snakes if they're scared of them and they're killing them in their backyard. So that's where I try to reach them. As far as being positive, well, I get a lot of credit for being so patient and considerate. online. And the only reason I do that is because I, vent and kick the walls and scream offline. And then I can come back and say, oh, that's actually an extremely rare mole king snake, not a copperhead that you just killed. Ask me first next time. And that's my big secret, but it's just between the three of us. The reason I try to be positive is that my goal with this outreach is to change attitudes. And if somebody kills a snake and is bragging about it, I could say, oh, you idiot. Why do you do that? You're so stupid. Nobody's ever going to say, you know what, Dave, I've given it a lot of thought and I am an idiot. I'm never going to kill a snake again. But what does happen relatively frequently, and I was surprised at how frequently this happened, is people say, wow, thank you for letting me know. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. And now I'm going to follow you and ask you first next time. It's often all they know. They grew up in families where it's the only good snake is a dead snake. You've probably all heard it a billion times. I know how. I have. And sometimes it's just as simple as exposing them to a different point of view without attacking them.
Yeah, I think that, so I'm from like rural Illinois, and I see people post pictures of snakes, sometimes snakes that they've killed. But my cousin Lori did this the other day. She lives at my grandpa's farm. She'd posted this huge black rat snake. It was maybe like 4 feet. And I know people in my family believe all these weird things about snakes. My other cousin told me that she believed that she cut it in half, the head would grow back. These are educated people. I'm telling you. But she said, oh, look at this horrible snake, and had posted on Facebook, and it was, I couldn't believe comment after comment. I hope you killed it. I hope you got it out of there. And I was like, did you kill it? I hope you like mice. Do you like mice? Would you, do you love lots of mice? You know, there's a food web going on here. I'm like, oh, that snake looks terrified of you. And I just kept making comments on there like this because I realized that to get people to really think about it, you know, you can't write, oh, how can you think this? Is it really so simplistic in your mind? But snakes it's one of those things that it's like still totally acceptable to kill snakes, even snakes that are like, under conservation threats.
It is really incredible. I think you hit the nail on the head. We all love animals. Everybody loves animals. Everybody hates cruelty to animals, except for snakes. And it's just, I think a lot of people just keep them separate in their mind. And the gruesome things you'll see people do to snakes and rituals that you would never see them do that to another group. It's interesting.
Yeah.
As an entomologist, I get a lot of that as well. The kill it with fire meme is old.
Oh, I bet. Absolutely.
But yeah,
so
snakes make it worse.
Shout out to, I don't know how to pronounce her Twitter handle, Catarania, Catarania. Sorry if I got it wrong. But she's doing a similar campaign. Is that right? Okay. She's doing a similar campaign to help people figure out if that's a brown recluse in your house. Spoiler alert, no. So check out hashtag not a brown recluse, which I think was kind of a tribute to the hashtags that I used, not a copperhead and not a copperhead.
Yeah. So how many, I just casually watch as you go through educating the public like this. Do you have an estimate of how many of the photos that are tagged as copperheads or cottonmouths actually are, and how much of them are, not those snakes, and or how many of those are actually fairly rare snakes that are hard to see under normal circumstances?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and Andrew Durso and I are trying to figure out how to formalize an analysis just to look at some of these public perceptions of snakes. I think that there's a steady proportion. I think it's not easy to answer. I think that maybe, I don't want to put a number on it, but a lot of people think that any snake they find is a copperhead. And that's pretty constant throughout the year. But in the summer, the copperheads become less active. So the proportions change, so they're wrong more often. But then the copperheads start becoming more active in the fall, so more snakes that you're actually able to encounter are indeed copperheads. So lots of people get it right. So it changes over time. The vast majority of snakes that I see on Twitter are non-venomous species like brown snakes, black rat snakes, garter snakes, and they are very frequently confused for venomous species. And they pay the price with their life.
Yeah, it's almost like copperhead has become akin to the way that some people call all pop Coke, you know? Oh, that's just a snake. I just mean a snake. All snakes are copperheads. It's like, no, that Venn diagram, is like a donut.
Yes,
Not,
it is an interesting point, and I think you can go pretty deep. It's not just people being bad with snakes. Maybe there's a cost-benefit ratio here, because if they assume it's a copperhead, they're not going to be getting bitten, right? So maybe it's poor identification skills with survival strategies versus it makes for a better story if it's a venomous snake. So there's all kinds of things going on.
yeah, that's interesting. That would be a really interesting project for you and Andrew to track those down as far as, following through with these types of things. Wow. I never thought about that. I see a lot of misidentification. There was like a Texas Herps like Facebook page, and I would always see someone who would, fix all of these things. It was kind of ridiculous, but wow. So, is your favorite snake the indigo snake?
Isn't it everybody's favorite snake?
It is a beautiful snake.
Man, they're incredible. 8, 9 feet long, glossy, blue, black. They're really impressive animals.
So maybe give people like me who have really no knowledge of snakes whatsoever. So we've got a really 8 or 9 foot long, glossy blue, one would assume somewhat indigo colored snake. That is found. Where's it found? What does it eat? What are the general biology of the snake? And then what's the problem facing it?
Yeah, the indigo snake is a really special species. This particular kind of indigo snake only is found in the southeastern United States. There's some other similar species out in Texas and out through Central America. This species was found probably Georgia, Florida, Alabama, a little bit of Louisiana. It's a big, highly conspicuous snake. They're really closely tied with the London pine ecosystem. And this is an ecosystem that is really in peril. Probably only about 3% of it's left. And it's been described as kind of a park with some trees in it. Really, really incredible system. And they need fire. So even the longleaf pine that's left often is managed without fire. And without fire, hardwood trees come in and they just basically change the habitat and make it a lot different than all the species that evolved with it we're used to, including the indigo snake. So the big problem with the indigo snake is habitat loss. They're also closely associated with gopher tortoises. They live in their burrows. Gopher tortoises have habitat problems. Lots of people ate them. So as the gopher tortoise declined, so did the indigo snake. Indigo snakes were killed on roads. They were collected for the pet trade. Basically, everything that could go wrong did go wrong for this animal. They're the largest native snake in this country. They're most famous for eating other snakes. So even if you're not a snake fan, or perhaps particularly if you don't like snakes, you'll probably like the indigo snake because it just chows down on everything that it puts in its mouth, like copperheads and eastern diamondback rat snakes are a real impressive animal. It's gone from Louisiana. It was gone from Alabama, gone from significant portions of Georgia, and it was basically hanging on in southeast Georgia and the Florida Peninsula, gone from the Florida Panhandle. Went on the endangered species list in 1978, I want to say. It was one of the early species. And, now we're still trying to figure out how to recover this animal. And it's going to rely on establishing populations where the animal used to occur, and that includes Alabama. So a large collaboration emerged to take Georgia snakes that had eggs, let them lay their eggs in captivity, and then let them go, raise the eggs, and then release those animals into Connecticut National Forest. in southern Alabama. And we've released about 100 so far, with 200 to go.
Wow. That's a lot of snakes.
That's amazing. It's when I think of reintroductions, it's usually with animals that are fast, you know. So it always, you know, like they open the gates and these the white rhinos take off, but then it just seems funny to be like, hey, just taking off. Like, it just seems funny to release snakes. I don't know why.
Yeah, you're probably imagining, you know, releasing the falcon or the owl, and it gracefully flies into the sunset. Yeah, we basically just drop them off into tortoise burrows, and then there they are. It's we try to create as much fanfare as possible, but you're right. It's basically slithering into a hole.
Yeah, that's too funny. What about the tortoises? Is there also, what kind of conservation issues are those? Are their numbers the same in Alabama?
Very similar issues face the tortoise that have faced the indigo throughout the range. In Alabama, there are more robust, let's say, populations of tortoises, and one of the best populations is the Conecuh National Forest, which is why it was chosen as a potential release site. So there are tortoises crawling around.
Are there any thoughts of the places where the tortoise populations are low that you could dig sort of artificial tortoise sort of holes that the snakes could then use?
Yeah, that would be cool. The thing is that the tortoises kind of maintain their burrows over time, so that might be labor intensive for people to try to replicate it. They do also use armadillo holes and stump holes, so there are a couple options out there if the tortoises aren't doing so well. Tortoises, by the way, used to be called Hoover chickens, because during the Great Depression, when Hoover was president, all these rural communities would rely on the gopher tortoise for food, and that's one of the primary reasons in many areas why they're virtually absent.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, and it makes a lot of sense.
They're not like rabbits, right, that they could breed every year with the high survival. It takes a long time. Lots of eggs get eaten by things. So if they do recover, you need to give them decades to do it.
That's really cool. So you said that the gopher tortoises are maintaining the burrows. So are the snakes cohabiting with the tortoises?
They are. Tortoise burrows, gopher tortoises in this area are considered keystone species because of these structures. They provide host to a wide variety of organisms, including things like the gopher moth, I think that's what it's called, and all these camel crickets are trying to get you in, pull you in, Morgan. All these
Well, I was saving this little fact up until we got to a little bit of a break, but there is actually, no word of a lie, there is a fly, a lesser dung fly in the family Ceraseridae that was described by my lab mate just across the lab here, that is only found in association and inside gopher tortoise burrows, Caproica testudinea. So
there you go.
We know nothing about it other than it's found in gopher tortoise burrows. So where they go or don't go, according to Hoover and his chicken policy, then neither does the fly. So
really interesting.
You see how the tortoise just pulls us all together?
Yeah.
Really a keystone species in so many different ways.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's really cool. I don't know, it's almost like a wind in the willows kind of situation, having all this stuff living concurrently in a burrow rather than taking over one owner after another, Hobbit style, I suppose. But there's two random things that live in whole references that really didn't need to be tied together. Good job.
An indigo snake could probably eat a small halfling. I don't know. Something to debate on another time. But the indigo snake's dirty little secret is that they'll sometimes eat baby tortoises. So the harmony that we've been talking about is a little disruptive. But they eat mostly snakes.
That's cool. And for anybody that's listening to the audio version of this podcast, you're probably going to want to jump over to breakingbio.com and check out the video portion of this podcast as well, which we'll post there. You can also find us on YouTube, because if I'm not wrong, well, actually I know this is going to happen because I saw David receive the snake as we were setting up the talk, but David actually received a pillowcase which looked like it had some sort of a long wriggly thing in it. and I think he's going to showcase that for us, assuming it's still in the pillowcase. I don't know how these things work.
Yes. We can talk about the Indigo Snake as much as we want, but it just doesn't replace keeping your eyes on. So we didn't release all of the snakes that we hatched here. We kept a few that went down to the Orion Center for Indigo Conservation. I think it's important I identify some of the collaborators. This is much larger than just Auburn University. Lots of people were involved. So some of the breeders went to the Orion Center. Orion Society has been a big collaborator, and we kept a couple here for education animals. So what we have here is one of the siblings of snakes that were released into Kanaka National Forest. I think he's in a good mood.
Oh, wow.
Huge ass snake. Holy.
Yeah.
Wow. That is really pretty.
I'm going to do one of these snake tricks to make the snake look even bigger. Oh, posing.
Oh, wow.
So how old would that snake be then? Like, that's a lot bigger than I was expecting.
Yeah, this is only a couple years old. You know, they grow really quickly. And after we release them, we've seen them grow a year and a year. It's really kind of incredible. And it's encouraging. It means that they're having no trouble finding food. And really growing and meeting their full potential. Yeah, it's a big snake.
That's a really big snake.
Wow.
So I guess this draws the question: if you're rearing these things in situ or in the lab to release them, and they're supposed to be snake feeders.
Yeah. Do you feed them snakes?
Do you keep a colony of feeder snakes, like people might keep feeder mice around? But so if you got like feeder garter snakes or something that you're just tossing in the pit with them, or are you feeding them regular snake food?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And reintroduction biology is a new and developing field, and it's important to think about these questions. For example, you know, when we grow up, we get used to certain foods, and then when we're adults, we like those foods. So what if we just fed these guys all those domestic frozen rats? Would they be ready and equipped to find prey in the wild? So we do try to feed them a diversity of prey, not just mice, but birds, and yes, including snakes. And it's kind of hard to maintain a snake colony, but we do catch them, find them on the road, and then feed them to the snakes.
Wow.
It's really hard to capture snakes in the wild, but we monitored Jimmy and Sierra Stiles down in South Alabama. They did their master's thesis on the Indigo Snakes, and they did radio telemetry. That allowed us to figure out things like survival and movements, and it also allowed us to catch indigo snakes in the act of feeding. And we've seen them eating copperheads and rat snakes and chasing racers all around. So it does look like whatever we're doing is working, and these things are eating and growing in the wild. It's really exciting to watch.
Wow.
That's really cool. All right, so I'm going to show off my lack of knowledge again. How does a snake eat and/or catch and kill another snake?
Snakes are fascinating. You've got a lot of different strategies. You know, you could take the. I'm trying to act casual here. Bigger they are, the stronger they are, but I'm putting them back in this case here. So snakes have they're a diverse group, lots of different strategies. You can think of the rattlesnakes, for example. They'll basically go by a path where they think a lot of small mammals are going to be crawling by, and they'll sit there silently, often motionlessly for days. And when one comes by, they'll nab it and then follow its scent trail. Other animals are constrictors. The boa constrictor is a famous one. They'll wrap you up. Indigo snakes are active predators. They'll go looking for prey, and it's really not a graceful act to watch, but they'll just start chewing on the head of whatever they find. And they actually have some pretty awesome pictures of an indigo snake eating a copperhead, and it's gruesome. It's not it's not glamorous. It's literally chewing on a snake's face, and then you just start swallowing. Not unlike how I eat.
That's awesome. Well, you don't normally think of snakes eating as well. Maybe some people do, but you know, you think of it as being a pretty non-struggling thing, them just swallowing something that they've either, like
Yeah.
you said, squeezed to death or bitten to death. But that's really interesting. So are they immune to the venom from coppermouths? God damn it. Copperheads or cottonmouths?
They do seem to be resistant, at least. I've never heard of an indigo snake dying from a venomous snake bite. They are well equipped to handle it in such a way that they don't get bitten too much, but like I said, I think that they are resistant as well. There's a number of snakes that seem to be resistant, a number of animals that seem to be resistant to snake venom, including the king snakes, which is another animal that eats snakes.
Yeah, I wonder if it's this arms race like we see with, newts and garter snakes, that sort of thing. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, things like opossums also seem to be fairly resistant, and hogs as well.
Interesting.
Well, this brings us to a nice little segue, so perfect. It's the tie-in between natural history observations and the big fancy sciences that people generally associate with science. Natural history has had a bit of a bad reputation in the last 15, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, depending on how far back you want to call it. But you do a lot of that sort of research on a very wide selection of organisms. Just browsing through your website earlier, I saw that you've had projects working on turtles, newts, salamanders, birds, frogs and toads, obviously snakes, various other lizards, and a lot of those were natural history observation papers and notes on basic biology and basic observation rather than experimentation. So where do you see the role of natural history in modern research, and how that's going to get influenced by academia and the pressures of modern academia?
Yeah, natural history is so important. Natural history is the foundation of my research program, and it should be the foundation of anyone who's doing ecology and conservation biology work. If you don't know where an animal is, what it's eating, how it spends its time, then first of all, you're not going to be able to generate any interesting ecological hypotheses, and you're not going to be able to know how human activity is going to be affecting this animal. So I really think natural history is important, and I do try to walk the walk as well and publish those kinds of observations. As far as its role in academia, I think we've all kind of lamented. I know we've talked about this on Twitter, how natural history has kind of been devalued in academia. We see a lot more faculty openings being filled with molecular folks and biology and physiology and that kind of thing. And we don't really see a mammologist being hired or a herpetologist. We don't see that as much anymore, and I think that's a big loss. However, if you read E.O. Wilson's book, The Naturalist, he's talking about the same conflict 60 years ago in Harvard between him and, was it Watson and Crick?
I think so.
Yeah, E.O. will email me later for that story. But so the pioneering ecologist and the pioneering molecular biologist, they've been going at it for decades, and we're continuing. It does feel like it's more pronounced now, but who knows? In any case, it is important to advocate for natural history.
Yeah, I feel like with all the issues facing museums, it's almost like natural history is being devalued at museums.
Oh yeah? How is that?
Well, there's so, like the Field Museum, there's so many funding cuts for these things, and it's like people have forgotten the science that these museums were built upon.
I agree, and you know what? If anyone's out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was young, I don't remember anyone being fascinated by hearing about genes and DNA. It was about going out and finding snakes and getting your boots wet and looking at the bats crawl around and catching fireflies, which are actually beetles.
Yes.
And I think that's what hooks people, and maybe we're losing something if we focus on all that molecular stuff and don't teach the kids to go out and find stuff on their own. And send me hate mail later if you grew up sketching pictures of DNA and field guides of admin and cytosine, but I bet there's not many of you out there.
Yeah, I think this is actually one of those areas where the cell phone revolution and social media is actually going to start. There's a lot of doom and gloom amongst senior scientists, perhaps, about younger generations glued to their cell phones and taking them on nature hikes when they go outside and all that stuff. But I actually see it as a major boon because I think it's going to allow them to connect with nature in ways that they may not get the chance to through traditional media. We don't see, Nat Geo's subscriptions and paper-based is way down. You see Discovery Channel shows, although better this year in Shark Week, but that are well far from nature documentary and well into science fiction, particularly your little Python adventure, if you'd like to go on about that some more. Giant anacondas killing people or trying to force feed themselves into a giant anaconda. So I think that having access to Twitter scientists like yourself and us, I might provide an extra outlet for them to learn and to experience some of this stuff on their own.
I agree. If somebody's taking out their phone during a hike, I might be a little skeptical of what they're up to. But I have been really impressed by all these little field guides and apps that are now available on your phone to identify creatures. What's the
iNaturalist, right?
Mm-hmm.
iNaturalist has a thing where you take a picture, and if kids don't know it, they can put it up there, and someone else will identify it.
Yeah, that's so cool. And what's that music program where you hold it up and it identifies the song?
Not Spotify. Is it Spotify?
Shazam?
No.
Shazam. There you go. Yes, Shazam, and the new Shazam for bird calls that's being developed as well.
Exactly, and that's cool. And something is lost when you're not digging through a field guide and really narrowing it down. But the end result is the same. It's a person that knows what they're seeing and experiencing.
Yeah, I use AmphibiaWeb when I'm traveling and I'm going to a new spot. I'm like, ping, what's there? So that way I know, some good things.
That's cool. What does it do? Give you a little checklist of what you can expect?
Yeah, it gives you a check. I mean, it's only amphibians, but it gives you a checklist of what's there in the area. I don't know how accurate it is, but there's a lot of stuff, and it's the whole world. So it's kind of interesting, because if you travel for a conference and you're thinking, because sometimes you go places and you're like, oh my God, I want to go herping with these people, but I have no idea what's there, and you can go through and sort of figure out what you really want to see.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It reminded me. I was in Azerbaijan a couple weeks ago, and there's no field guide, or at least no field guide in English for that. So the way that I learned about what was there and how to identify was iNaturalist, which you mentioned before. They had a great selection of all the different amphibians and reptiles that I could come across.
Yeah, because iNaturalist also gives you info, like how frequently people are finding these things and like more, different locations. Yeah, I like iNaturalist a lot.
Cool. Well, I got to ask, because you brought it up, were you doing research in Azerbaijan? And if so, what kind of research are you doing out there?
So I got an email out of the blue a couple of years ago about a new construction project going through and how it intersected the habitat of a rare turtle. And this engineering firm was interested to know how the construction activities could influence the turtle and what they could do about it. So they flew me out there. So I checked out the construction area, looked for turtles, saw that there were some swimming around in the area, and just try to kind of provide some recommendations as to how potential problems could be mitigated. There's the European swamp turtle, and there's the Caspian turtle. And walking around in the morning, I found lots of other cool things like snakes and frogs making their way through these canals.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. I was really glad to.
Like when you got the email, were you like, oh my god, and then because it's been a couple of years, you finally showed up and you're like, yeah, so I'm here. You might know me from Twitter. I'm just here to check out some turtles.
NBD. Yeah. No, it was pretty. I guess I was skeptical to just receive this email out of the blue. But I did the research, and they assured me that they were real. And it was pretty exciting. Long flights, though. I never really thought I'd end up in Azerbaijan, but it was cool to do so under pretty interesting circumstances.
Yeah, I guess if I received that email, I would be really skeptical that it wasn't some kind of scam. I would be looking for the Nigerian prince in the email.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be looking for a loan.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Exactly right.
See, kids, learn your natural history. You'll see the world.
Exactly. Somebody will email you and say, we want to fly you to this country. So I was there for about 10 days, and hopefully I'll go back for another 10 days sometime in the next few months.
That's awesome.
That's cool. Really obscure place to get the chance to go to on somebody else's dime. That's awesome.
I admit I haven't spent much time thinking about Azerbaijan before I got that email, but I'm glad I went. Really, really interesting country and great people.
Cool.
Yeah, I would definitely have to go ahead and check the map on that one again and again.
It's just south of Russia and north of Iran.
Okay.
I could actually see Iran from the window of the place where I was staying.
Wow.
It didn't get too much closer than that.
That seems like you wouldn't want to, maybe.
That's really cool. Now, tons of opportunities when you're connected online and know your natural history.
Take it from us, kids.
Role models. All right, so I think we're pretty much out of time. We're going to let you go back to doing all your important research and getting back to releasing snakes. But
That went so quick.
I know. Time goes by so fast here at Breaking Bio. We need physicists to tell us what's going on. But where can people find you online, follow along with all your travels and the various outreach projects that we've talked about today? Okay,
my primary outreach contribution is my blog, www.livingalongside-wildlife.com. There's a space on Facebook as well. It's facebook.com/livingalongside-wildlife. And please follow me on Twitter @alongsidewild. And I'm happy to answer any of your wildlife questions there.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that we link to all those different sources, as well as some of the other things that we've talked about, including the Slate magazine article where David was so lauded, and some of the other stuff.
Also the pictures. I want to see a picture of them eating the copperhead.
We'll try and find that, and we'll link it to it as well. So you can find all that information in show notes at breakingbio.com. Like always, you can find us online and follow along as we follow the careers of some of the people that we've had on the show over the last 3 years at Breaking Bio on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook as well by searching for the Breaking Bio podcast. And you can take us with you while you're on your summer vacations over the next few weeks by looking for us on iTunes and Stitcher. And if you wanted to drop a review or a rating on either of those sites, it would do us a world of good so more people can get with the program like you are with Breaking Bio. Finally, we need to thank the European Society for Evolutionary Biology for helping us keep the lights on and keep down some of our costs with some of their outreach funding. And I want to thank David again for joining us this week and bringing on our first live animal to the show, which is pretty spectacular and all sorts of cool information. So thank you very much, David.
There's more where that came from, and I appreciate the invitation. Like I mentioned to you beforehand, I've been listening for a long time, and I'm honored to be on the show.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much.
Take it from David. Tell your friends. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys next week.